Here's a 28mm gaming miniature. He's a blacksmith by Reaper, which is an American company, and lots of people know him. And that's the scale that we're working to. You have to sort of allow for the base of that figure. He probably stands something like 35mm tall. You have to sort of ignore that base. Now, there's a lot of debate between architectural historians about whether or not cruck framed buildings are more primitive, earlier forms of timber frame buildings, or whether or not they are simply a regional variation, a sort of a matter of taste and available materials. But let's say that this fella has got permission to build a house, and whether or not he sources the timber from somebody else or he's going to actually do it himself. What he would like is an oak tree, and he'd like a great big piece of oak, because obviously he would like his house to be as tall, as impressive as possible. The thing is, an oak tree, which is the best form of wood because it's incredibly strong and durable, doesn't grow tall and straight. It grows like this. This is the profile of an oak tree that might be 50 to 100 years old, and I've removed all the twigs, and I've removed all the leaves, and that is approximately the shape that you'd get. As you can see, relative to the height of our chap there, he's not going to get a really long straight piece of timber out of it. Now you can join lengths of timber to make two medium-sized bits into a long beam, but it doesn't tend to be very strong. So this is the solution. What happens is we cut our oak tree down. We even take away our little bits of masking tape, and what we're left with is that. It's the trunk and a bit of the main branch. And then the real magic happens, because that is not actually two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. And we take this nice thick beam and we split it, and then we have the two halves of the essential timbers of our cruck framed building. And that principle of taking beams and splitting them is really key to medieval architecture. And then you retrieve the bit that fell down the back of the radiator, and you put in a crossbeam like that. I got the curves, I had the curve rather too exaggerated, so I've slimmed it down a little bit. Usually a couple of diagonals and a couple of little spacer pieces, and then you elevate that, and then you elevate the side of the building, which is what everybody else regards as the front and back, because usually that's the bit that faces the street and the back garden. But to the master builder, and that's the word we need to use because the word architect isn't used yet, the idea of somebody who designs a building but doesn't actually build it, that doesn't come along until the 17th, 18th century. And then this is elevated and propped against it. And this, where I've painted it in white, this would be the door, and that would be your window. This long beam here can be made by joining beams together, because you've still got all the rest of the tree. And that doesn't have to be particularly strong. You can see where they would actually be, where they're supported on top of verticals. This helps us, this is the principle of the cruck frame, and as well as demonstrating that, it also, that last part there that I've just described, helps to understand why medieval buildings are conceived of in terms of bays, because once you've got that structure in place, you can start to make your buildings as long as you want. You have to have at least one of those at the other gable end, but very often there are 2 or 3 of these pieces in the structure going along, maybe even going along a whole row of shops or cottages, shops, whatever they are, like the Weavers Row building in Spon Street, Coventry. It's coming on a bit. I've made a few more decisions. This bridge was just blocking me from getting on with the design, so I may change it later, but I went for a boxed-in structure based on this building, which is in Smithfield, London. It's where the London meat market was for centuries. And just looking at this, this is actually the bridge there. That's a sort of more modern oriel type window. This area above is sort of what I'm going for. It actually looks as if that might have been built in at a later time. Yeah, for something like that there. Can't find any real examples of timber frame buildings that have open galleries, open balconies. I have a feeling I've seen a picture of one somewhere at some time, but I can't actually source one. So this is where we're starting from the second floor up. We're starting to get more and more fantasy and surreal. Some kind of open balcony there. It'll have to have a little canopy roof sticking out further than it, and I'm going to go entirely for thatch. The whole building, my D&D campaign is all set in a pseudo Middle Ages, but I'm quite precise about date. I'm sort of setting it in the 11th, 12th century. So, for example, I don't have plate mail in the campaign. You can get plate mail, but only from dwarves. But it's not common. It's not frequent. And most of the general sort of base for where the ordinary non-magical technology is set is that part of the Central Middle Ages. Has given me, this has pushed Wizard Once Was His Father, who's still to be named, a problem, because originally I thought that the cruck frame cottage was going to be stuck on the top there or there. Now it's going to go at least one level higher. The other thing that I'm scratching my head about is chimneys. Now, chimneys are not 11th, 12th century. They come along later. You're looking at 14th, 15th century. And part of the whole structure, the way a timber-framed house is built to be as high as possible. That's why our little 28mm blacksmith digger actually wants a building with a roof higher than him, isn't so that he can have extra stories, extra floors in there, though he might have a solar, which is like an elevated bed platform really. It's mostly because the smoke goes up inside the building and filters out through the roof. It's only when you get to the 14th, 15th century that chimneys become a very desirable thing, and then they just kind of slap them on the outside of the building. So in terms of chronology, I shouldn't have chimneys, but they're very cool. Building in chimneys gives the building a more kind of added on sort of shape. I've also thought about the depth, because I was starting to think of that I originally thought that the whole building, the whole finished art piece, would be essentially square in plan, and it shouldn't be, because all medieval buildings are built around the rectangle principle with the sequence of bays. On a corner, it's going to be more like an L shape. So this will be the face on one street. There'll be the face on another street, and that L shape made me think, what can I put in the open part of the L? Well, that's where the tower can go, taking us back to essentially a square plot base. So I think the tower, the big tower, going from the ground up, sort of behind this building, I believe that's now in. And then I put another floor on, and I've worked something out. I'm wondering why on earth I've never realised this before. When you see a building where you've suddenly got these triangular bits on a high level, all they've done is they've taken that building block unit of the lower floors, and they've taken the same building block unit of the upper floors, and they've just rotated it, and that's all that's essentially how those buildings are constructed. And this form of upper windows with what's like a mini gable end facing the opposite direction of the main gable end is what that's evolved from. It's evolved from that medieval building block of the bays. Never realised that before. Perhaps you think I'm stupid. Well, you learn or you don't. It's now late February, so I'm working on the first part of this video series, which is the out and about bit, which hopefully you'll have already watched, even though in real time I haven't actually made it yet. But in terms of the main project of actually creating things, probably 6-7 weeks have slipped away, and I've been working on photography stuff and always writing for Dungeons and Dragons and Cthulhu by Gaslight, and I got very distracted on the Book of Death, which is this, and you can see how I made that on my channel, but that was meant to be just a little thing, and I got more and more involved in that. And what I still haven't done is actually used my hot knife, and my big slab of XPS has been sitting there looking at me for all that time. So I think I better see what it does, don't you? And yeah, I did read the instructions, and it said be in a well ventilated place, which I didn't know that before. And I'm a bit worried that it might send the smoke detector off, but I suppose won't know until we try it. And of course, anything like this, working on a new technique with a new tool, you should work with a bit of scrap first, but I haven't got any scrap or waste of this material. And people say, oh, you can find it in skips and things, but I've been looking in any skip I've gone past, and I haven't seen any of this material being conveniently thrown away. So let's see what it does. It's been heating up for more than the required 20 seconds. It makes a slight hissing noise. There is a bit of smoke. I don't know what I'll do if the smoke detector goes off in this room. I'm quite sure how to turn it off here. Quite a nice sensation. Leaves a bit of a black sticky gloop. I burn myself, should have put the apron on. Leaves a bit of a black sticky gloop on there. Don't know if that just burns off cleanly or if you have to wipe it off with some solvent. Yeah, there we go. First blood. Well, that is my first piece, and there's no denying that trying to cut it with this was a nightmare, really. It's simply not going to work for cutting up a large block like this, but sort of I wanted to try that anyway, just to get used to the tool. I ended up using a saw, and here made a jolly old mess, which is going to have to be swept up and vacuumed up. But that is the first piece. That was going to be the first piece, but I think that's too thick. That's going to be the third floor, which is actually my largest floor in terms of area, and that's going to be more than twice the height of him. So this piece is going to be my rough block. You can see the shape of it. It's the L shape of the building. And now I will use the hot tool and start cutting that down into a sort of slightly organic curved wall shape. Well, I'm not actually liking the material. I joked about the smoke and setting the fire alarm on. You see the smoke coming off that now? Actually, there's more smoke than I imagined, and it's a smell of molten plastic, much stronger and much more than I thought. This is actually a domestic cooker with a extractor fan over it, and it's just about taking the smoke out, but I'm very surprised at it. This is what's happening when I'm trying to use this tool in the way I wanted to, sort of just gently bevel off the edges. See if the camera will pick it up. It's doing it. It melts away through it, but it does tend to sort of skid and skip, and it leaves long trails of just skidded out then, so I don't get the kind of control I'd get over it with using a knife. And I'm thinking I'm going to have to go over this afterwards with a sanding pad. So I'm sort of thinking, well, I could have just done it all with a sanding pad to start with, which is going to mean smoke. It's going to mean doing it outside with a dust mask, and that's not much fun because the weather's about to turn cold again, and I like working at night.